everybody. So today I'm gonna talk a little bit more about astrocartography. I got a couple questions that were really good I was gonna answer like type of response, and I thought, no, I'll just put this in a video because it should be added on to the astrocartography discussion. Astrocartography, it's a very hard word for me to say. And also there were a couple questions asked in the subreddit this week. They were good questions, they were interesting questions. One of them I did respond to, but I still wanted to put something on here about this. And then the other one I didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole at the time. But now I kind of do want to bring it up because it ties into other things. But anyway, the astrocartography, let's start with that. Okay, so I got a question. Saturn is my natal 4th house, and obviously my IC is in the 4th house area, with my moon being in the 3rd house loosely conjunct the IC. Are all astrocartography charts built to use your 4th house with your hometown, or is this just a coincidence? Now, this actually is true in my case too. My north node is conjunct my IC. The north node IC line runs right through Houston, which is where I was born. This happens to be the case for me as well. But I did look at some astrocartography lines for people whose charts that I know really well off the top of my head. This does not always have to be the case. There are people that whose charts I know off the top of my head that I was looking at their astrocartography. They don't have any IC lines near their hometown. They don't have any or any planets that happen to be in their 4th house. They don't happen to have those close by. So I don't know. I don't think that it's always set this way. That's a very good question though, but I don't believe that it always has to be. I think that in this person's case and in my case, it happens to be a coincidence. But yeah, it doesn't always appear to be the case. That is a good question though. The other question they asked is, what distance within the line do you have to live for it to be effective? I've read a pretty wide orb, one site said up to 700 miles, which seems wide. What orb do you go by? This is a good question, and honestly, I can't give you all a general answer to this. Now, I will say this, 700 miles does seem wide. It seems very wide to me. It seems too wide for me. If that seems right for you, 700 miles seems right for you, just right, by all means go with it. But it does seem too wide to me. You know, when I'm looking at, let me put it like this. When I'm looking at aspects in a chart, or even transits to a natal chart, I will generally use an orb of 5 degrees applying and separating from the planet in question. Or let's say you've got your sun conjunct, I don't know, Chiron, let's say. I would be looking at an orb of 5 degrees, Chiron 5 degrees applying with the sun and 5 degrees separating with the sun. Now, if I were to think about this in terms of astrocartography, I would probably only go out 500 miles. Though I would go out 500 miles if the aspect in question was really tight, right? In the chart. I might go out that wide, or in the case of let's say we're talking about because everybody has planets that are stronger than others. Now I will say this, the way that I assess this might not be the way that you do, and it might not be the way that that you've read to do it. But something I think about off the top of my head, like the chart ruler. I think the chart ruler is very important in a chart, very, very important. I might think that lines, like in my case, Jupiter is my chart ruler. So Jupiter lines might be able to go out wider than, say, planets that aren't as strong in my chart. Exactly what that is, though, would depend on the chart in question as to how wide I would go. Or how much I would bring it in. It really would depend on the chart. If you're ever curious about having me do this for you and look at your astrocartography and personalize it to you, let me know, because I do this. We can totally do a session like this. But yeah, I do think 500 is probably the widest I would go out. Most of the time, I guess I wouldn't say always, because it really does depend. There might be some cases where I might go out wider. But I think 500 would be pretty typical to be as wide as I would go out. Yeah. And then obviously, you know, the planets that are the strongest in your chart, those I might go out to 500. Planets that maybe don't seem to have as much strength, I would bring it in some. Yeah. That's just kind of my thoughts on that. That's also a really good question, though. That's a really, really good question. And sorry, this just got noisy over here. He is constantly out doing yard work. So yeah, I'll try to talk louder. But yeah, those are just my thoughts on that. Yeah. Okay. So some other questions. Somebody this week in the subreddit, and I did answer this one. Somebody in the subreddit asked, I can't remember what the exact question was, but it was something like either they had their moon in the 12th house or somebody they knew did, but either them or this person had a good relationship with their mother, but had a bad relationship with their father. And it was something along those lines. And like, why is that when the moon in the 12th house is typically thought of as not having, you know, the mother either being absent or unavailable or something like that. You know, it's really easy for your mind to go that way because we hear that the moon is the mother, and it certainly can be. I don't want to say that that's wrong. That's not wrong. The moon can definitely represent the mother. The moon is definitely female, feminine energy. The moon, you know, it is nurturing. It is all these things, but it does not have to represent the mother. It doesn't. Sometimes it can just be family in general. Sometimes it can be the father. Same thing as the sun can sometimes be the mother. What matters here is like, okay, like in the case of the moon in the 12th house and the father being absent. Was the father more moon influenced in his own chart? Because that'll kind of give you an idea as to if you've got a parent, let's say you've got your father is more moon influenced. The moon in your chart may actually represent him. So I don't know. You would have to look at theirs too to say that. But I don't. And I know that it's kind of like retraining yourself how to think about these things, because it does not always have to mean that the mother is absent. It could very well be the father is absent. It could very well be like the notion of home and family is just kind of absent, or things have been absent about it, or what have you. You know, it doesn't always have. Yeah. I guess just be careful with thinking about the moon as always being the mother and the sun as always being the father. Because I do think that if you think about things in such rigid terms, I think that's when mistakes can be made. So I wouldn't do that. And if you've got questions, if you're reading for somebody and you have questions about that, by all means ask, because this is how we as astrologers kind of learn things, is by trends, by seeing, you know, things pop up a bunch in different people's charts. Even in saying that, though, you know, and similar themes popping up in people's charts. But in saying that doesn't always mean that they're universal. There are very few I don't really even know if there are any aspects that are completely universal. You have to take the entire thing into account. And I think if you're not taking the entire thing into account, things are going to get missed. I mean, yeah, things are going to get missed. And I mean, like, you've also got to look at what that moon is doing. Like, is that moon make a bunch of really nice aspects to things in the chart? Because that could also mean that relationships with the mother or with the father, if the father is more moon influenced, or even with family in general, they might not be as hard. There might be something that's not as clear about those things, but it doesn't necessarily mean absence. But those trends and themes that people do bring up, they definitely do have their place, right? I mean, I'm talking to somebody with my son in the 12th house, and my dad fucking bounced, and he left, and I haven't seen him since. So, you know, I mean, these trends these trends and themes do exist for a reason, but I don't think that we as astrologers and people that want to be astrologers or want to learn how to read can look at these things and be like, it's universal. No, it's not. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. So, yeah, gotta take the whole thing into account. But it was a good question. Was definitely a good question. But I think we just all need to think about how we think about these things. Yeah. And not generalize so much. Then there was another question that I didn't want to touch. Not on the subreddit anyway. It was about self-harm in natal chart. They were asking about somebody else. I'm looking at the question right now. This person's moon is conjunct the north node in the 12th. But lots of people have this going on in their chart. Not all of them self-harm, so they don't really understand. You know, yeah. And I'm not totally sure exactly why the moon in the 12th house conjunct the North Node is why they brought this specific thing up as dealing with self-harm. I mean, I do know that the 12th house can be painful, it can be grief, it can be loss, it can be those things. So I get that part. And I know that the moon conjunct the North Node generally means that there's, generally speaking anyway, this is not universal, but can mean that from a past life lens, the emotions of the person were far away from them, family was far away from them, things like that, you know, which can be painful. There is usually a need to move into emotions in some way in this lifetime to tap more into them. But other than those things, I'm not totally sure exactly why they picked this aspect. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, because I guess my point here is there is no one aspect that will show self-harm or anything like that. There's not. Again, you want to take the entire fucking thing into account when you're reading. Yeah. You want to take the, especially, and I mean, I'm not trying to harp on this person. This is a very valid question, and it is, you know, I get asking it. And you're more than welcome, just to be clear, you're more than welcome to ask questions like this in the subreddit. You really are. I don't want to dissuade anybody from doing that, but I think a better way to have asked this might have been to have posted a chart with it, because it is so, it's very, this is such a sensitive topic. I didn't want to touch it without a chart. Because I don't want to generalize. And well, actually, I don't know if I would have touched this anyway, because this was actually a question about somebody else, which might be why they didn't post a chart, because I don't think this question was about them, which I appreciate, because we don't really want you posting charts of people that aren't you, unless it's a synastry chart that includes you or something like that. But yeah, this is a question. I mean, yeah, it's a hard question to answer without seeing a chart, because I would not want to give a generalized answer for something like this. Yeah. But yes, you can see this kind of stuff in a natal chart, but it's not like a one size fits all, like everybody that has this aspect, or Jesus Christ, that's loud. Sorry. It's not like a one size fits all thing, like where, you know, one person who has, you know, like everybody that has, I don't know, the moon conjunct the North Node in the 12th house, they're all going to self-harm. It doesn't work like that. So, but I could totally, if there was a chart, I could totally look at it and be like, okay, well, this going on here and here and here and here and here and doing this and this and this, perhaps could cause somebody to do that. Perhaps, but there are a lot of those things, right? There are a lot of those things, but yeah, I didn't want to give a generalized answer to this. Another couple of questions that I've gotten some emails about the Uvalde school shooting that happened this past week, asking if I would do the astrology behind it. I'm not going to do that right now. It's too, I think it's too soon. And I'm just not going to do it. And plus there's a part of me that feels like I don't want to give that little cunt that did all of that any attention. Even though he's dead, good riddance. I don't really want to give that attention. So I'm not going to do anything like that right now. Something that I have thought about doing though is something dealing with mass shootings in general. Not necessarily a specific one, but looking at like the astrology surrounding a few of them. Though again, I don't really want to give these, because I was also asked the same thing when the shooting in Buffalo happened, and I didn't want to touch that either for the same reason. But I wouldn't mind looking at the astrology of these things to see if there are any trends or anything like that. But I wouldn't be using these shooters' names, because as far as I'm concerned, they're a bunch of cunts. And I don't I don't want to give them, I don't want to use their names. I don't want to. They would be like cunt 1 and cunt 2 and whatever. Like, I don't want to. Yeah. So I might do something like that, but not on the individual event itself. No, not now anyway. Maybe in time. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But my heart does absolutely break for all of those families affected, the community that was affected. I have a lot of questions about. I just have a lot of questions that seem like a lot of the way that this happened should not have happened. Across the board, which pisses me off. It pisses me off. So it's awful, but my heart absolutely goes out to the community and to anybody that has been impacted by this. It's just awful. Absolutely fucking awful. And I'm so sorry. But I think I'm going to go ahead and head off. If you are curious about having me read for you or something, I'll put where you can find me below. And if y'all have other questions, like the astrocartography ones, if y'all have other questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. And I will see you all later.